I was sitting on my porch in Mesa, Arizona, watching the last drops from my morning coffee evaporate in the 112-degree heat when Patricia Henderson, the HOA president, pulled up in her white Lexus SUV with that look on her face that I had learned to dread over the past 3 years. The drought had been going on for 14 months straight. Lake Mead was at record lows, the city had implemented mandatory water restrictions, and my landscaping business was barely hanging on by a thread. But I had adapted. While everyone else was watching their yards turn to dust, I had invested my savings into something that kept me afloat, a commercial water tanker truck, a big one, 5,000 gallons capacity. I filled it up from a private well I had dug on my property years ago, back when I bought this place on the outskirts of Mesa, before the Saguaro Hills HOA even existed. Patricia stepped out of her vehicle wearing her usual outfit, pressed khaki capris, a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was 48, with blonde highlights that screamed expensive salon, and that permanent expression of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. "Ethan Newman," she called out, walking up my driveway like she owned it. Technically, according to her interpretation of HOA rules, she probably thought she did. "Patricia," I replied, not getting up from my chair. "What can I do for you this fine morning?" She pulled off her sunglasses and gave me that tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm here on behalf of the HOA board. We have a situation that requires community cooperation." I took another sip of my coffee, even though the cup was empty. "Go on." As you know, our community fountain at the entrance has been a point of pride for Saguaro Hills since the development was established. It's in our founding documents that the fountain must remain operational as it represents the prestige and property values of our neighborhood. I knew where this was going, but I let her continue. "With the current water restrictions, the city has informed us that our permit for the fountain is being reviewed. However, they've made an exception for private water sources. We've noticed that you have a substantial water tanker truck that you've been using for your landscaping business." "That's right," I said. "Been keeping my clients' properties alive while everyone else is going under. It's been good for business." Patricia's smile tightened even more. "The HOA board has voted, and we're formally requesting that you provide water from your tanker to maintain the community fountain. It's for the good of everyone's property values, including yours." I set my coffee cup down and leaned forward. "You want me to use my water from my well, transported in my truck that I paid $45,000 for, to fill your decorative fountain?" "The community fountain," she corrected. "And yes, we calculate that it would only require approximately 2,000 gallons per week to maintain proper levels with evaporation." 2,000 gallons a week. I let out a low whistle. "That's 8,000 gallons a month. Do you have any idea what that costs me in fuel alone, not to mention wear and tear on the truck and the value of the water itself?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "I'm sure we can work something out. The HOA has a discretionary fund. We could offer you a small stipend." "How small are we talking?" We were thinking $50 a month. I actually laughed out loud. $50? "Patricia, my commercial clients pay me $300 per 1,000 gallons, and that's at drought rates. You're asking for 8,000 gallons a month, which would normally cost $2,400, and you're offering me 50? Her expression hardened. "Mr. Newman, need I remind you that according to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA covenants, all residents are required to contribute to the maintenance and upkeep of common areas when called upon? This fountain is a common area. The covenant says I have to maintain common areas. It doesn't say I have to provide thousands of gallons of my private water supply for free." Patricia pulled out her phone and tapped on it a few times. "I have the HOA attorney on speed dial. Would you like me to get his interpretation of the covenant?" I stood up, my 6'2" frame towering over her 5'5". "You do that, Patricia, and while you're at it, have him look up Arizona water rights law. That well on my property, I own the mineral and water rights, have since 2012, before this HOA even existed. The water I pump is mine, legally and completely." Her face flushed red. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that undermines community values. Everyone else in this neighborhood has made sacrifices during this drought. Mrs. Chen's rose garden is completely dead. The Rodriguez family had to remove their vegetable garden. But you're driving around in your tanker truck making money while the rest of us suffer." "I invested in a solution," I shot back. "That's called business, and if you want my water, you pay market rates for it. $2,400 a month, same as I charge everyone else." Patricia's laugh was shrill. "The HOA will never approve that kind of expenditure for water. Our entire annual maintenance budget is only $30,000. "Then I guess your fountain is going to run dry," I said, picking up my empty coffee cup and heading toward my front door. "This isn't over, Mr. Newman," she called after me. "The board meets tomorrow night. We'll be discussing this matter, and I promise you there will be consequences for your lack of community spirit." I turned back to face her. "Looking forward to it, Patricia. I'll bring my attorney." She stormed back to her Lexus and peeled out of my driveway, leaving rubber marks on the concrete. I stood there for a moment, looking at the black streaks, and pulled out my phone to call my lawyer, Derek Martinez. We had gone to high school together, and he had helped me set up my LLC for the landscaping business. "Ethan," he answered on the second ring. "What's Patricia done now?" "How did you know it was about her?" "Because you only call me when the HOA is being unreasonable, and Patricia is unreasonable about 90% of the time." "What is it this time? Your grass too green? Truck parked the wrong direction?" I filled him in on the fountain situation. Derek was quiet for a moment, then I heard him typing on his keyboard. "Okay, so here's the deal," he said. "Your water rights are solid. Arizona is a groundwater state, and since you own the rights and the well predates the HOA, they have absolutely no claim to your water. The covenant about maintaining common areas is vague enough that any judge would laugh them out of court if they tried to force you to provide free water." "But?" "There's always a but," I muttered, "but Patricia and that board have a history of making life difficult for people who don't play ball. Remember what they did to the Johnsons when they refused to repaint their house in the approved shade of beige?" I remembered. The Johnsons had received violation notices every single day for 6 months. Eventually, they just sold the house and moved. "So what do you suggest?" I asked. "Go to the meeting. Bring documentation of your water rights. Bring your business expense records showing what it costs to operate the tanker. Be professional, be factual, and offer a reasonable compromise if you want to avoid a war. But don't let them bully you into free water." The next evening, I walked into the HOA meeting at the community center with a folder full of documents. The room was set up with tables in a U shape, and about 20 residents were scattered in the folding chairs that faced the board's table. Patricia sat in the center, flanked by the other board members, Gary Whitmore, the vice president who owned a car dealership, and mostly just agreed with everything Patricia said, Susan Chen, the secretary who actually seemed reasonable most of the time, and Tom Bradford, the treasurer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Patricia called the meeting to order and went through the usual business, approving last month's minutes, discussing the landscaping contract for the common areas, arguing about whether the neighborhood signs needed repainting. Finally, she got to what everyone was really there for. Item 7 on the agenda, water supply for the community fountain. Patricia looked directly at me. "Mr. Newman, would you like to address the board?" I stood up and walked to the front, laying out my documents on their table. "I've brought documentation showing my water rights, which predate this HOA. I've also brought my business expense records showing the actual cost of operating my water tanker service. Based on market rates and operational costs, providing 8,000 gallons per month to maintain the fountain would cost $2,400 monthly." A murmur went through the crowd. Patricia held up her hand for silence. "Mr. Newman, those rates are outrageous for neighbors helping neighbors. This is a community." "These are the same rates I charge all my commercial clients," I replied calmly. "I'm not inflating prices. In fact, because this is local and I wouldn't have to drive as far, I'd be willing to offer a 15% community discount. That brings it down to about $2,000 a month." Gary Whitmore leaned forward. "That's still way over our budget. Can't you just do it as your HOA common area maintenance contribution? Everyone has to chip in." I pulled out another document. According to the covenant, common area maintenance refers to volunteering for community cleanup days, serving on committees, and similar activities. It has never been interpreted to mean providing thousands of dollars worth of commercial services for free. I've spoken to my attorney, and he's confirmed this interpretation. Susan Chen spoke up. What if we did a payment plan? Started smaller, maybe 1,000 gallons a week instead of 2,000. Patricia shot her a look that could melt steel. The fountain requires adequate water to function properly. Anything less would be an embarrassment to the community. I addressed Susan directly. I'd be willing to work with a reduced schedule, but the per-gallon rate would remain the same. 4,000 gallons a month would be $1,200 with the community discount. Absolutely not, Patricia declared. This is ridiculous. You're trying to extort the HOA. I'm trying to run a business, I countered. If you want my services, you pay for them. If you don't, then you need to find another solution for your fountain. Tom Bradford, who had been silent up until now, cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe we should consider shutting down the fountain temporarily until the drought ends. We could use the maintenance budget for other priorities. Patricia's face went crimson. The fountain is non-negotiable. It's in our founding documents. It represents everything this community stands for. It represents wasting water during a drought while people's gardens die, someone called out from the audience. I turned and saw it was Marcus Rodriguez, whose vegetables garden Patricia had mentioned. Order, Patricia snapped. Mr. Newman, the board needs to discuss this matter privately. We'll let you know our decision. There's nothing to decide, I said. I've made my offer, you have my rates, you know how to reach me. I gathered my documents and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Patricia calling for a motion to enter executive session. I did not stick around to hear it. 3 days later, I was servicing one of my commercial clients, a small office park that paid top dollar to keep their entrance landscaping green, when my phone buzzed with an email. It was from the HOA attorney, a guy named Richard Stevens, who worked for a firm that specialized in HOA law. The email was a formal demand letter. It cited Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the covenants, and claimed that my refusal to provide water for the fountain constituted a violation of my obligation to maintain common areas. I was given 10 days to comply or face daily fines of $100. I forwarded the email to Derek and called him immediately. They're really going there, he said after reading it. Okay, I'll draft a response. We'll explain very clearly why they're wrong and why any attempt to fine you will result in a lawsuit. I'll also point out that Arizona law prohibits HOAs from imposing fines without proper notice and a hearing. Do it, I said. I'm tired of Patricia thinking she can bully everyone into doing what she wants. Derek's response letter was a masterpiece. It was 3 pages of legal citations, case law, and polite but firm language that basically told the HOA to back off. He sent it certified mail and copied me on the email version. Patricia's response came faster than I expected. She called an emergency board meeting, and this time the agenda item was violation hearing for Ethan Newman, failure to maintain common areas. I showed up with Derek this time. The community center was even more packed than the last meeting. Word had spread through the neighborhood that there was drama, and people loved drama more than they loved water in a drought. Patricia went through her presentation, claiming that I was in violation of the covenants and that my selfish behavior was damaging property values. She had printed out photos of the fountain, which was indeed starting to look pretty rough. The water level was low, and algae was growing on the sides. When it was my turn, Derek stood up. Members of the board, I'm Derek Martinez, representing Mr. Newman. I've reviewed the covenants in detail, and I've brought copies of Arizona water rights law and several relevant case precedents. He spent the next 15 minutes systematically destroying Patricia's argument. He explained water rights, contract law, and the limits of HOA authority. He pointed out that the covenant language was vague and had never been enforced in the way Patricia was claiming. He also noted that attempting to fine me without proper cause would open the HOA to a lawsuit for harassment and improper enforcement. Furthermore, Derek concluded, Mr. Newman has offered to provide water services at a discounted rate. The HOA's refusal to pay market rates for a commercial service does not constitute a violation on his part. It constitutes an unreasonable demand on yours. The room was silent. Susan Chen looked uncomfortable. Tom Bradford was nodding slowly. Gary Whitmore looked confused, like he was trying to figure out which way the wind was blowing. Patricia's jaw was clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. The board will deliberate and provide a decision within 5 business days. As Derek and I walked out to the parking lot, he put a hand on my shoulder. That went well. I think you've got Susan and Tom on your side. Gary will go with the majority. Patricia's outvoted. You don't know Patricia like I do, I replied. She doesn't give up. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the city's Code Enforcement Division. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that I was operating a commercial vehicle from a residential property in violation of zoning laws. I called Derek immediately. Is this legal? Can they do this? Let me look into your zoning and business permits, he said. When did you start the landscaping business? 5 years ago. I registered the LLC, got all the permits. The truck is registered as a commercial vehicle, and I have it parked in my driveway, which should be legal as long as it's not causing a nuisance. Derek did his research and called me back that afternoon. You're fine. Mesa's zoning code allows commercial vehicles to be parked at residential properties as long as they are not excessively large, don't create noise or traffic issues, and the business doesn't generate customer traffic to the residents. Your tanker qualifies. You don't have clients coming to your house. You're good. So what do I do about the code enforcement complaint? You respond to it with copies of your permits and registrations. I'll draft a letter. And Ethan? Document everything. Every interaction with Patricia, every email, every letter. If this escalates to a lawsuit, we'll need a record of harassment. I started keeping a detailed log. Every time Patricia drove by my house slowly, staring at my tanker truck, I noted the date and time. Every snippy email from the HOA, every violation notice for minor issues like my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. Every bit of it went into the file. 2 weeks later, the code enforcement officer came out to inspect my property. He was a middle-aged guy named Carl who looked tired and overworked. He walked around my truck, checked my permits, and made notes on his tablet. Mr. Newman, everything looks in order here. Your vehicle is properly registered and permitted. You're not in violation of any zoning codes. Thank you, I said. Can I ask who filed the complaint? Carl glanced at his tablet. It was submitted anonymously through the online portal, but between you and me, I get a lot of complaints from HOA presidents who think they run the city too. Don't worry about it. The case is closed. I thanked him and added his report to my growing file. Meanwhile, the fountain at the neighborhood entrance was getting worse. I drove by it every day on my way to job sites, and I watched it deteriorate. The water level dropped to the point where the pump was struggling. The algae spread. Some teenagers threw soap into it one night, and it foamed up like a bubble bath. Without proper water flow and treatment, it became a genuine eyesore. Property values were actually starting to suffer, but not because I wasn't helping. It was because Patricia was so stubborn about paying for water that she let the signature feature of Saguaro Hills turn into a swamp. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that there was growing dissatisfaction with the board. Several residents had approached Patricia about just paying me to refill the fountain, but she refused. It had become a matter of principle for her. She wasn't going to let me win. Then came the September board election. HOA board positions were volunteer, but they had to be elected annually. Patricia had run unopposed for the past 4 years because nobody else wanted the headache of dealing with neighborhood politics. This year was different. Marcus Rodriguez threw his hat in the ring for president. Susan Chen announced she was running for re-election as secretary. 2 other neighbors, Jennifer Walsh and David Kim, announced they were running for the other 2 positions. Patricia campaigned like she was running for Congress. She sent out glossy mailers talking about maintaining property values and community standards. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group constantly, sharing articles about the importance of HOA enforcement. Marcus ran a simpler campaign. His platform was basically, let's be reasonable neighbors instead of ridiculous tyrants. It resonated. The election was held on a Tuesday evening in late September. I showed up to vote, along with what looked like most of the neighborhood. The turnout was unprecedented. Usually maybe 30 people bothered to vote in HOA elections. This time, over 100 residents showed up. When the votes were counted, Patricia lost. Not by a little bit, but by a landslide. Marcus won the presidency with 68% of the vote. Susan kept her position as secretary. Jennifer and David won the other board seats. The only person from the old guard who survived was Gary, who managed to squeak by as treasurer. Patricia's face during the announcement was something I would remember forever. She looked like someone had slapped her with a frozen fish. She stood up, grabbed her designer purse, and walked out without a word. The next day, I got a call from Marcus. "Ethan, it's Marcus Rodriguez. Got a minute?" "Sure, Mr. President," I said with a grin. "Please, just Marcus. Listen, the new board had our first meeting this morning. We want to hire you to service the fountain. What would you charge us?" We negotiated for about 20 minutes. I agreed to provide 1,000 gallons twice a month, which would keep the fountain functional without being wasteful, for $800 a month. It was below my normal commercial rate, but Marcus explained that the HOA budget was tight, and I was willing to work with them since the new board seemed actually reasonable. "Deal," Marcus said. "When can you start?" "I can have the first delivery there tomorrow morning," I replied. "Perfect. And Ethan, thanks for not backing down. Patricia needed to learn that she doesn't own this neighborhood." The next morning, I backed my tanker up to the fountain and started pumping water into it. Several neighbors came out to watch, including old Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down from me and who I had helped with her yard work a few times. "It's good to see someone standing up to Patricia," she said. "That woman has been a terror for years. My late husband used to say she got elected HOA president and thought she was Queen of England." I laughed and continued filling the fountain. It took about 45 minutes to pump in 1,000 gallons. When I was done, the fountain looked better already. The water level was back to normal, and with the pump running properly again, it actually looked like the nice feature it was supposed to be. I sent my invoice to Marcus that afternoon. 3 days later, the check arrived in my mailbox. $800 signed by the treasurer with a note from Marcus. "First of many. Thanks for your patience." Everything seemed to be settling down. I continued running my landscaping business, the drought continued torturing Arizona, and the fountain got regular water deliveries. The neighborhood seemed happier without Patricia's iron-fisted rule. Then, about 6 weeks after the election, things got weird. I was refilling the fountain on a Tuesday morning in early November when I noticed something odd. The water level seemed lower than it should be. I had just filled it 3 days earlier, and while evaporation was a factor in Arizona heat, this seemed excessive. I mentioned it to Marcus when I saw him at the grocery store that weekend. "Hey, have you noticed the fountain seems to be losing water faster than normal?" Marcus frowned. "Now that you mention it, yeah, I drove by yesterday evening and thought it looked low. Think there's a leak?" "Maybe. Might want to have someone inspect it." Marcus said he would get it checked out, but before he could arrange an inspection, I got a call from a neighbor named Steve Patterson at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday. "Ethan, sorry to wake you, but I just drove past the fountain coming home from a late shift. Someone's parked there with a truck and a pump. I think they're stealing water from the fountain." I was out of bed and in my truck in under 3 minutes. I drove the half-mile to the neighborhood entrance with my heart pounding. Sure enough, there was a white Lexus SUV parked near the fountain, and in front of it was a pickup truck I did not recognize, with a small pump and hose running from the fountain to a portable water tank in the truck bed. Standing next to the truck, directing the operation, was Patricia Henderson. I pulled up and got out of my truck. "Patricia, what the hell are you doing?" She spun around, and even in the dim streetlight, I could see her face flush. The man operating the pump, who I now recognized as her husband Greg, stopped what he was doing and straightened up. "This is none of your business, Ethan," Patricia said. "You're stealing water from the HOA fountain. That's absolutely my business since I'm the one being paid to keep it filled." "I'm not stealing anything," she snapped. "I'm a homeowner in this community, and this is a common area. I have every right to use the common area resources." "No, you don't," I said, pulling out my phone. "You don't have the right to drain the fountain. That water belongs to the HOA, and you're not authorized to take it." Greg Henderson stepped forward. He was a big guy, probably 6'4" and 250 pounds. "Maybe you should mind your own business and get back in your truck." I was already dialing 911. "Mesa Police, I'd like to report a theft in progress at the Saguaro Hills community entrance." Patricia's eyes went wide. "You wouldn't dare." "Already did," I said as the dispatcher answered. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, gave the address, and stayed on the line while Patricia and Greg scrambled to disconnect their pump and pack up their equipment. They were loading everything into the pickup truck when the police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. 2 officers got out. The older one, whose nameplate read Officer Morrison, approached us while his partner hung back near the patrol car. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" Morrison asked. I explained that I was the contractor hired to maintain the fountain, that I had received a call about suspicious activity, and that I had arrived to find Patricia and Greg pumping water out of the fountain into their personal water tank. Patricia immediately went on the offensive. "Officer, this is a simple misunderstanding. I'm a homeowner in this community, and I was just taking a small amount of water from my garden. It's a common area fountain." Morrison looked at the fountain, then at the water tank in the pickup truck bed. "How much water's in that tank, madam?" "I don't know, maybe 50 gallons?" Patricia said. Morrison walked over and tapped on the tank. It made a very full, heavy sound. He checked the gauge on the side. "This says 200 gallons, and it's nearly full. That's not a small amount." I pulled up my contract on my phone and showed it to Morrison. "I'm paid to maintain this fountain. The water in it belongs to the HOA. Mrs. Henderson is not authorized to remove water from it." Morrison asked for everyone's identification. While we were standing there, Marcus Rodriguez pulled up. Someone had apparently called him too. "Officers, I'm Marcus Rodriguez, the HOA president. What's happening?" Morrison explained the situation. Marcus looked at Patricia with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Patricia, you can't just take water from the fountain. That's theft." "It's community property," Patricia insisted. "The water's the property of the HOA," Marcus corrected. "You're not the president anymore. You have no authority to take it, and even when you were president, you couldn't just help yourself to HOA resources for personal use." Officer Morrison consulted with his partner, then came back to the group. "Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, based on what I'm hearing, you've taken approximately 200 gallons of water that doesn't belong to you. That's theft. I'm going to issue you both citations. You'll need to appear in court." Patricia's face went from red to white. "This is ridiculous. It's just water." "It's theft, madam," Morrison said firmly. "And given the drought conditions and water restrictions currently in place, the court takes this kind of thing seriously." Greg Henderson looked like he wanted to argue, but Patricia put a hand on his arm. They took their citations in silence, packed up their equipment, and drove away in separate vehicles. Marcus and I stood there watching them go. "I can't believe she actually tried to steal water from the fountain," Marcus said. "I mean, I knew she was bitter about losing the election, but this is crazy." "How's her yard looking?" I asked. "Has she been following water restrictions?" Marcus thought about it. "You know, I drove past her house last week, and her lawn was still pretty green. Most people's yards are brown or dead. I just figured she was using her household water allotment." "Most people can't keep a lawn that green on the household allotment," I said. "Not in this drought. I bet if the city checked her water usage, they'd find she's been violating restrictions." I went home and tried to get a few more hours of sleep, but I was too wired. The next morning, I called Derek and filled him in on the night's events. "She really can't help herself, can she?" Derek said. "Okay, so here's what's going to happen. She'll get a court date for the theft citation. It's a Class 2 misdemeanor in Arizona to steal property worth between $100 and $1,000. 200 gallons of water during a drought at your rates would be about $60, but the court might value it higher given the circumstances." "What kind of penalty are we talking about?" I asked. "For a first offense, probably a fine, maybe community service. But Ethan, this creates a precedent. If she's been stealing water from the fountain regularly, and I bet she has based on what you said about the water level dropping faster than expected, then she's been stealing from the HOA for weeks. Marcus should check the surveillance cameras if they have any." That was a good point. I called Marcus and suggested he check if there were any security cameras covering the entrance area. He called me back an hour later. "We've got cameras," he said. "They're motion activated and they upload to a cloud service. I just reviewed the footage from the past 6 weeks. Ethan, she's been doing this at least twice a week. Every time you fill the fountain, she comes back a day or two later and drains a couple hundred gallons. I counted 14 separate incidents." "That's not petty theft anymore," I said. "That's systematic. She's stolen probably 2,800 gallons of water." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's over $800 worth, based on what we pay you. I need to talk to the HOA attorney about this." The HOA attorney, After reviewing the evidence, advised Marcus to file a formal complaint with the police and to pursue a civil claim against Patricia for the stolen water. Marcus wasn't thrilled about it. He genuinely seemed like a guy who just wanted everyone to get along, but the board voted unanimously to proceed. The detective assigned to the case, a sharp woman named Detective Sarah Chen, came out to interview me and Marcus and to review the surveillance footage. She was thorough and professional, and she didn't seem amused by Patricia's behavior. "This kind of water theft is becoming more common during the drought," Detective Chen explained. "People get desperate, or in some cases they just feel entitled. We've had cases of people stealing from fire hydrants, from construction sites, even from each other's wells. The courts are starting to take it seriously because water is a precious resource right now." She collected all the evidence, including my contracts, invoices, and the surveillance footage. 2 weeks later, Patricia and Greg Henderson were formally charged with theft, upgraded from a misdemeanor to a Class 6 felony, because the total value of stolen water exceeded $1,000, and because it involved multiple incidents showing a pattern of criminal behavior. The neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. The Hendersons hired a criminal defense attorney, a slick guy named Peter Brooks, who immediately started making noise about how this was a witch hunt and his clients were being persecuted for a simple misunderstanding. The preliminary hearing was set for January. In the meantime, Marcus had sent a cease and desist letter to Patricia, formally banning her from accessing the fountain or any other common areas without board approval. The letter also informed her that the HOA was filing a civil lawsuit to recover the value of the stolen water, plus legal fees and punitive damages. Patricia violated the cease and desist order 3 days after receiving it. She was caught on camera walking around the fountain area, apparently inspecting it, at 11 o'clock at night. Marcus called the police and she was issued a trespassing citation. It was like watching someone dig themselves deeper and deeper into a hole. Derek, who was now representing both me and the HOA in the civil case, just shook his head when I told him about the trespassing incident. "She's making this so much worse for herself," he said. "Any decent attorney would be telling her to lay low, show remorse, maybe offer to settle. Instead, she's racking up more charges." The drought continued through November and December. Phoenix hit a record 147 days without rain. Lake Mead dropped to its lowest level since the reservoir was created in the 1930s. The governor declared a state of emergency and implemented even stricter water conservation measures. My landscaping business was booming. While other landscapers were going out of business, I had my tanker truck in my well, and clients were willing to pay premium prices to keep their properties from turning into dust bowls. I hired 2 additional employees just to keep up with demand. The fountain at Saguaro Hills, meanwhile, was the only decorative water feature still running in the entire area. Every other HOA, every business, every public space had shut down their fountains and decorative water features to comply with conservation orders. But Saguaro Hills had a private water source, me, and technically we weren't violating any restrictions because the water came from a private well, not from city supplies. It became a point of pride for the neighborhood. Property values, which Patricia had been so worried about, actually increased. People wanted to live in the community with the working fountain because it signaled financial stability and good management. In mid-December, I was doing a routine fountain refill when a news van pulled up. A reporter and cameraman got out, and the reporter, a young woman named Amanda Chen from the local NBC affiliate, approached me. "Are you Ethan Newman?" she asked. "That's me," I said, shutting off the pump. "I'm doing a story about water management during the drought. Your fountain here is one of the only decorative water features still running in the entire Phoenix metro area. Can I ask you a few questions?" I agreed to an interview. Amanda was smart and asked good questions about water rights, private wells, and how communities could adapt to drought conditions. I explained my business model and how investing in the tanker truck had allowed me to not only survive but thrive during the water crisis. "There's also been some controversy in this neighborhood, hasn't there?" Amanda asked. "Something about the former HOA president?" I kept my answer diplomatic. "There were some disagreements about water usage and compensation, but the current board and I have worked out an arrangement that benefits everyone." The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. It was generally positive, focusing on creative adaptation to drought conditions. I got calls from 3 new potential clients the next day. Patricia, apparently, did not appreciate the positive coverage. She posted a long, rambling screed on the neighborhood Facebook group about how I was exploiting the community and how the news story was propaganda. Several neighbors called her out, and the moderators eventually deleted her post and removed her from the group for violating the harassment policy. The preliminary hearing for the criminal charges happened on January 10th. I attended as a witness, along with Marcus and Detective Chen. The courtroom was small, and the judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Marilyn Foster, seemed unimpressed with the defense attorney's arguments about how this was all a misunderstanding. "Mr. Brooks," Judge Foster said, "your clients were caught on camera by police actively removing water from a fountain that doesn't belong to them. There's also evidence of at least 14 prior incidents. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is theft." The case was bound over for trial. The trial date was set for March. The civil case moved forward simultaneously. The HOA was suing for the value of the stolen water, which we calculated at $2,800 based on my commercial rates, plus legal fees of approximately $5,000, plus punitive damages. Patricia's attorney in the civil case tried to argue that the water wasn't worth commercial rates since it was just sitting in a fountain, but Derek countered that the HOA had paid commercial rates to acquire that water. Therefore, that was its value. In February, Patricia's attorneys approached Derek with a settlement offer. They proposed that Patricia would pay the HOA $1,000 to drop both the civil suit and the criminal charges. Marcus brought the offer to a board meeting, and I attended since I was directly involved. The board discussed it for about 30 seconds before unanimously voting to reject the settlement. "She stole from the community," Marcus said. "She needs to face the consequences. If we let her buy her way out of this, it sends a message that the rules don't matter if you have money." I agreed completely. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about accountability. The criminal trial began on March 15th. It was held in Maricopa County Superior Court, and the prosecutor was a young but sharp assistant district attorney named Michael Torres. He laid out the case methodically: the surveillance footage, the police report from the night Patricia was caught, my testimony about the water contracts and the unusual depletion rates, and Marcus's testimony about the unauthorized water removal. Patricia's defense attorney tried to paint her as a dedicated community member who had made an error in judgment. He argued that she believed, as a homeowner, she had a right to use common area resources. He emphasized that she had served as HOA president for 4 years and had always acted in what she believed was the community's best interest. The prosecution's response was devastating. Torres showed the jury the timeline of events, how Patricia had demanded free water for the fountain, how she had lost the election after her unreasonable behavior, and how she had then systematically stolen water in what appeared to be an act of spite or entitlement. Vessel. "This isn't about a misunderstanding," Torres told the jury. "This is about someone who believed the rules didn't apply to her. Someone who thought that because she had been in charge, she could help herself to community property even after she was voted out. That's not a mistake. That's theft." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Patricia and Greg Henderson guilty on all counts. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. Judge Foster, who had presided over the trial, did not look kindly on the Hendersons when they appeared for sentencing. "Mrs. Henderson," Judge Foster said, "you held a position of trust in your community. You were elected to lead and to serve. Instead, when you didn't get your way, you engaged in a pattern of theft that violated that trust completely. Mr. Henderson, you aided and abetted your wife's criminal behavior." She sentenced Patricia to 1 year of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and a fine of $5,000. Greg got the same probation and community service, but a smaller fine of $2,000. They were also ordered to pay restitution to the HOA for the value of the stolen water. The civil case settled a week later. Patricia agreed to pay the full amount demanded by the HOA. The value of the water, legal fees, and punitive damages, totaling approximately $9,000 on top of what she owed in criminal restitution and fines. All told, Patricia's stubbornness about not wanting to pay me for water ended up costing her and her husband over $18,000, plus probation, plus community service, plus criminal records. The drought finally broke in late April. A series of storms rolled through Arizona, dropping record rainfall. Lake Mead's level stabilized. The city began lifting water restrictions gradually. My landscaping business stayed busy, but the desperate premium rate emergency calls tapered off. The Saguaro Hills fountain continued to run through it all. Even after the drought ended and other communities reactivated their water features, ours remained special because it had never stopped. It became a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience and, ironically, good management under the new board. I still serviced the fountain twice a month. Marcus and I had become friends through the whole ordeal. His wife, Carla, invited me to their house for dinner one evening in May, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first demanded free water from me. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said over grilled chicken and corn on the cob. "Property values in Saguaro Hills increased 8% this year. The whole region was down because of the drought, but we went up." "That's what happens when you have competent leadership instead of a tyrant," I said. Carla laughed. "I still can't believe she tried to steal water from the fountain. What did she think was going to happen?" "She thought she'd get away with it," I said. "She'd gotten away with bullying people for years. She thought she was untouchable." Marcus raised his beer. "Here's to accountability, and to contractors who don't back down when bullies make demands." We clinked bottles, and I looked out at their backyard. They had a small vegetable garden growing again, now that water restrictions had eased. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, all thriving in the late spring warmth. The Hendersons, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, were thinking about selling their house and moving. The combination of the criminal record, the financial hit, and the social stigma of what they had done had made Saguaro Hills uncomfortable for them. I couldn't say I felt bad about it. My business continued to grow. I bought a second tanker truck and hired another driver. The drought had taught Arizona an important lesson about water management, and even though the immediate crisis had passed, people wanted to be prepared for the next one. I expanded into rainwater catchment systems and gray water recycling, helping homeowners become more water independent. The fountain at Saguaro Hills became something of a local landmark. Tour guides in the area, showing potential homebuyers around, would point it out as an example of good community management. The HOA even put up a small plaque near it, explaining the water source and the community's commitment to sustainable practices. On the one-year anniversary of Patricia's first demand for free water, I was doing a routine fountain service when I noticed someone watching me from across the street. It was Patricia. She was sitting in her Lexus, just staring at the fountain with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger? Regret? Resentment? Probably all three. I finished the refill, packed up my equipment, and as I was driving away, I passed her car. Our eyes met for just a second. I didn't wave or acknowledge her. I just kept driving. There was nothing to say. The fountain was running. The neighborhood was thriving. Justice had been served. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to back down when someone tries to bully you. Patricia had tried to force me to provide free water because she thought she had the power to demand it. She had been wrong. Her fountain had run dry, just like I had warned, and when she tried to solve the problem through theft instead of fair payment, she had paid a price far higher than what she would have paid me in the first place. As I drove home that evening, past houses with green lawns and blooming gardens, past businesses with clean sidewalks and healthy landscaping, I felt satisfied with how everything had turned out. I'd built a successful business by preparing for hard times and refusing to be exploited. The community had learned that good leadership mattered, and Patricia had learned that actions have consequences. The fountain continued to flow, fed by my tanker truck twice a month, a symbol of what happens when people work together fairly, instead of demanding something for nothing. In the end, that was all I had ever wanted: to be compensated fairly for my work, to be treated with respect, and to live in a community where the rules applied to everyone equally. The drought had been hard on everyone, but it had also revealed character. It had shown who would adapt and who would try to exploit others. It had shown who would lead responsibly and who would abuse power. And in the end, like water flowing downhill finding its natural level, everything had settled into a fair and just arrangement. Patricia Henderson's name would be remembered in Saguaro Hills, but not the way she had hoped when she first became HOA president. She wouldn't be remembered as a guardian of property values or a champion of community standards. She would be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when ego and entitlement override common sense and basic decency. The fountain ran clear and clean, its water sparkling in the Arizona sun, a testament to the simple truth that sometimes the best solution is the honest one. You pay for what you use, you respect other people's property, and you treat your neighbors with fairness. Patricia had refused to learn that lesson the easy way, so she had learned it the hard way. And the fountain, which she had fought so hard to maintain without paying for, now stood as a monument to her failure and to the community's resilience. I pulled into my driveway and looked at my tanker truck, dusty and worn but reliable. That truck had saved my business during the worst drought in Arizona history. It had given me leverage when the HOA tried to exploit me. And it had become the tool that ultimately brought justice to a community tired of being bullied. Sometimes, the things we invest in to protect ourselves end up protecting others too. My truck, my refusal to be exploited, they had all combined to create a better outcome for everyone in Saguaro Hills. Everyone except Patricia, but she had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. The fountain would keep running, the neighborhood would keep thriving, and I would keep building my business on the foundation of fair dealing and honest work. That was the real story. Not the drama or the conflict, but the simple principle that treating people fairly and standing up for yourself when someone tries to take advantage creates